The rain pounded against the roof like frantic fingers drumming a warning. It had been falling for hours, turning the narrow roads into rivers of black water that reflected the dim glow of the streetlights. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, a long, sorrowful sound that carried through the night. Ethan sat in the driver's seat of his rusted old sedan, gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He wasn't sure why he felt so uneasy. It wasn't just the storm or the empty stretch of road ahead. It was something deeper, something gnawing at the edges of his mind like an itch he couldn't scratch. His hands were shaking and his breath came in shallow bursts. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that he was about to see his childhood home again after nearly 15 years. The town of Hollow Pines had never been kind to Ethan. The people there whispered behind his back, cast wary glances in his direction, and kept their distance. He didn't blame them. He had been a strange child, quiet, withdrawn, prone to vivid nightmares that left him screaming in the night. His mother had tried to reassure him, telling him that bad dreams couldn't hurt him. But even as a kid he had known better. Because the nightmares weren't just dreams. And now, after all these years, he was back. The house stood at the end of a long, winding driveway, hidden behind a row of gnarled trees. The moment Ethan stepped out of his car, he felt it, the weight of the past pressing down on him like a thick fog. The house looked the same as he remembered. 2 stories of peeling paint, crooked shutters, and a porch that groaned under its own age. As he walked up the steps, his fingers hovered over the doorknob. The key felt heavy in his palm. He took a deep breath and turned it. The door swung open with a slow creak, revealing the darkness beyond. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the faint scent of something he couldn't quite place. He stepped in cautiously, his footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. The furniture was still there, covered in white sheets like the ghosts of a life left behind. He reached for the light switch, but before he could flick it on, something moved in the corner of his vision. He froze. A shadow just at the edge of the hallway, gone before he could fully register it. His pulse quickened. It was probably nothing, just his mind playing tricks on him. He had spent years convincing himself that the things he saw as a child weren't real. But then he heard it. A whisper. Faint, almost like a breath against his ear. "Welcome back, Ethan." His blood turned to ice. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. 'Cause it was his own. Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. The sound of his own voice, but warped, distorted like it had been pulled from the depths of a bad dream. He spun around, his eyes darting across the darkened hallway, searching for movement. The house was still, silent. Only the distant rumble of thunder outside reminded him that time hadn't stopped. He took a shaky step forward, reaching for the light switch again. This time he flipped it on. A weak, yellow glow filled the hallway, casting long, stretched shadows across the walls. The space in front of him was empty. Just dust floating in the air, settling after years of undisturbed stillness. Maybe it was the house itself playing tricks on him. Old wood creaking, the wind pushing through the cracks. That had to be it. But deep down Ethan knew better. His childhood here had been anything but normal. He remembered nights spent staring at the ceiling, too afraid to close his eyes. He remembered the way his mother looked at him, worried, exhausted, when he told her what he saw, what he heard. She had never doubted him, though. Not like the others. Ethan exhaled slowly, shaking off the unease creeping up his spine. He shut the door behind him, locking out the storm and whatever ghosts of the past tried to follow. The house was his now, left to him after his mother passed. He had avoided coming back for years, but there was no running anymore. His footsteps echoed as he moved through the house, past the covered furniture, past the dusty picture frames hanging crooked on the walls. He stopped in front of one, wiping away the dust with the sleeve of his jacket. It was an old photo of him and his mother. She was smiling, but he wasn't. He remembered that day. He had been 6. The night before, he had woken up screaming, convinced something was watching him from his closet. His mother had held him until he calmed down, whispering reassurances he never truly believed. His fingers traced the edge of the frame before he stepped back. He needed to shake this feeling. He was just tired. Ethan made his way to the kitchen, flipping another light switch. The dull flicker of an old bulb buzzed above. The air smelled stale like old wood and forgotten time. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to focus. He just needed to get through the night. Maybe tomorrow in the daylight, the house wouldn't feel so heavy. He opened a cabinet, searching for a glass. The shelves were mostly empty, except for a few forgotten dishes left behind. He grabbed one, turning toward the sink. Then he heard it. A floorboard creaking. Not from where he stood. From upstairs. Ethan froze, the glass in his hand suddenly feeling too fragile. He swallowed hard, his ears straining in the silence that followed. He told himself it was nothing, just the house settling. But then it came again. Low, deliberate footstep. Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had locked the front door. No one else should be here. He turned, his eyes fixed on the staircase just beyond the hall. The upstairs was completely dark, a yawning void leading to the rooms he hadn't set foot in since childhood. He wanted to ignore it, pretend he didn't hear anything. But something inside him, a deep, gut-wrenching instinct, told him that wouldn't change a thing. He had to look. His steps were slow as he approached the stairs, each creak of the wood beneath him making his pulse quicken. He gripped the railing, peering up into the darkness. "Hello!" His voice barely rose above a whisper. No answer. But the silence felt wrong. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. He exhaled and started up the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached the top, the air felt different, thicker, like the house was holding its breath. The hallway stretched before him, lined with closed doors. His old bedroom. His mother's room. The guest room no one ever used. His childhood memories clawed their way back. Nights spent hiding under the covers, too afraid to move. The feeling of being watched. The whispers that never had a source. Ethan stepped forward, his hand reaching for the door to his old bedroom. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the handle. Then, from behind him, a quiet click. The sound of a door unlocking. His entire body stiffened. He turned his head slowly, his breath caught in his throat. At the end of the hall, his mother's bedroom door stood slightly open. A sliver of darkness spilled into the hallway. Ethan's pulse hammered in his chest. He had locked every door before leaving all those years ago. He was sure of it. He took a slow step forward, his feet unsteady beneath him. The door creaked, moving just an inch more. He reached out with a shaking hand and pushed it open. The room was cold, freezing like winter had crept inside. The curtains billowed slightly, but the window was shut. The bed was still made, just as it had been left. But something was wrong. The closet door was open. His throat tightened. His mother had always kept it closed. Always. His body screamed for him to leave, but his legs carried him forward anyway. He reached the edge of the bed, his fingers grazing the blanket. Then, from inside the closet, the whisper came again. This time it wasn't just his voice. It was two voices. One was his. The other was his mother's. They spoke in perfect unison. "Welcome back, Ethan." His vision blurred, his breath shuddering. The closet door stood wide open now. And something was standing inside. Not just one thing. Reflections of himself and his mother, but wrong. Their eyes were too dark, their smiles too wide. Ethan stumbled back, his chest tightening with terror. His mother had always warned him about the house, about the things that lived in the corners waiting. But he had never truly believed. Not until now. Ethan couldn't move. His body refused to obey, trapped between fear and disbelief. The figures in the closet stood motionless, their faces barely illuminated by the weak light from the hallway. His reflection, the thing wearing his face, tilted its head slightly as if studying him. The smile on its lips never faltered. Neither did his mother's. A sick feeling churned in his stomach. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the longer he stood there, the more he felt something familiar in the air. Something he had buried deep, locked away with the memories of his childhood. The house had never been empty. The whispering started again, low and distant, curling around him like fingers pressing against his skin. It wasn't coming from the figures. It was coming from the walls, the floors, the very foundation of the house itself. Words he couldn't quite understand, spoken in voices that twisted and overlapped, stretching the silence until it felt unbearable. Ethan took a step back, his breath coming in short, uneven gasps. His back hit the doorframe, and the slight touch sent a shock of panic through him, as if something might grab him from behind. His mother's voice had always told him the same thing when he was young. Never turn your back on the whispers. He had never questioned why. Now he understood. The figures in the closet didn't move, but the air between them seemed to ripple, warping as if reality itself was bending. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He had to do something. He had to break whatever spell this was before it swallowed him whole. Forcing his shaking legs to move, he lunged forward and slammed the closet door shut. The moment it clicked into place, the whispering stopped. Silence crashed down around him so suddenly that his ears rang from the absence of sound. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the bed. His chest heaved as he struggled to steady himself. The room was still. Cold. The figures were gone. But the feeling remained. Ethan's hands trembled as he raked his fingers through his hair. He had been in this house for less than an hour, and already the past was crawling back to claim him. His mother had tried to protect him, to keep him away from whatever lived within these walls. But now that she was gone, there was nothing keeping it at bay. He needed to get out. His body moved on instinct, pushing him toward the hallway, down the stairs toward the front door. He barely noticed the old photographs watching him from the walls, their glass frames catching the dim light and reflecting his own pale face back at him. His heart pounded as his fingers fumbled for the lock. Click. The door didn't budge. His breath hitched. He twisted the knob, yanked at it with all his strength. The lock was open, but the door wouldn't move. It was as if something on the other side was holding it shut. A chill crept up his spine. He turned, pressing his back against the wood. The house was waiting. The air felt heavy, thick with an energy he couldn't describe. He had spent years convincing himself that the things he saw as a child were just dreams, that his fears had been nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. But now, standing in the middle of his childhood home, trapped in a house that refused to let him leave, he knew the truth. He hadn't imagined any of it. A sound echoed through the house, soft and rhythmic. A step. Not from upstairs this time. From the kitchen. Ethan's pulse hammered as he turned his head toward the hallway leading to the back of the house. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, moving with a certainty that made his skin crawl. He couldn't see anyone, but he knew he wasn't alone. Swallowing hard, he forced himself to move. He couldn't just stand here, waiting for whatever was in the house to come to him. He needed answers. The kitchen was dimly lit, the single overhead bulb casting long shadows across the counters. The old wooden table still sat in the center of the room, exactly as he remembered it. The footsteps had stopped. Ethan scanned the space. His nerves wound so tight he thought they might snap. Then he saw it. A figure standing just beyond the doorway that led to the back porch. At first, he thought it was his reflection again. The shape was eerily familiar. His height, his build. But as the figure stepped closer, the dim light revealed something else. It was him. Or at least something wearing his face. But this time it didn't smile. Its expression was blank, hollow, as if the features had been placed there like pieces of a mask. Its eyes were dark, empty, stretching far beyond where they should have ended. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The figure lifted a hand and pressed it against the doorframe, its fingers curling slightly. Ethan didn't move. Then, in a voice that was both his and not his, the figure spoke. "You left," it said, tilting its head. Ethan's stomach twisted. The thing took another step forward. "You shouldn't have come back." Ethan took a shaky step backward, his mind racing. "What are you?" His own voice barely sounded like his own. The figure didn't answer right away. It just stood there, watching him, its dark eyes unblinking. Then slowly it smiled. Not a human smile. Something else. Something that stretched too wide, too wrong. "We have been waiting," it whispered. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. A sound came from behind him. The closet door upstairs. Opening. His blood turned to ice. He wasn't alone in the house. And he never had been. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. His body screamed at him to run, but he was frozen, trapped between the thing wearing his face and whatever had just stirred upstairs. The house was closing in, its presence tightening around him like unseen hands gripping his throat. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. The figure in the doorway took another step forward. The light above flickered, casting its twisted smile in and out of shadow. "We have been waiting," it said again, the words stretched and unnatural, as if something else was speaking through his stolen voice. Ethan backed away, his foot catching on the worn rug beneath the kitchen table. The chair beside him scraped against the floor, the sound sharp in the thick silence. The figure's head twitched at the noise, its eyes never leaving his. He had to move. He had to get out. The back door was just behind the figure, the only other exit besides the front door that refused to open. But there was no way past it. A creak from above sent a new wave of fear crashing over him. Something was moving upstairs. Slow, heavy footsteps. Not rushed, not hesitant, just patient. Ethan's body tensed. The house wasn't just watching him anymore. It was coming for him. The thing in the doorway shifted slightly, as if it could hear his thoughts. The flickering light buzzed, casting warped shadows along the walls. Then it spoke again, softer this time. "You don't remember, do you?" The words sent a chill crawling down Ethan's spine. His mouth went dry. "Remember what?" His voice was barely more than a whisper. The thing just stared at him, that awful smile still stretched across its face. Then, slowly, it lifted a hand and pointed toward the hallway, toward the stairs. Ethan shook his head. "No," he said, but his voice trembled. The thing's smile widened. "Yes." Crash exploded from upstairs. A door slamming open. Ethan jolted, his entire body locking up. Then the footsteps started again. This time they weren't slow. They were coming. His breath came in short, panicked bursts as he turned, his mind racing. He couldn't stay here. He couldn't let whatever was upstairs reach him. But the thing in the doorway wasn't moving. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He didn't know what it wanted. He didn't know what any of this meant. But something deep inside him, something buried beneath years of trying to forget, was beginning to stir. Flashes of memory. Dark room. A voice whispering his name. Something reaching for him in the night. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, his heart slamming against his ribs. He couldn't remember. He didn't want to. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. His eyes snapped open. He turned just in time to see a shape emerging from the hallway. Figure. Not the thing in the doorway. Something else. Something taller. Thinner. Its limbs were too long, its movements too smooth, like it was gliding rather than walking. Its head tilted slightly, but its face was lost in shadow. Ethan's entire body went cold. The thing in the doorway didn't react. Just stood there smiling, waiting. The figure in the hallway took a step closer. Ethan stumbled backward, his legs nearly giving out beneath him. "What do you want?" His voice was barely above a whisper. The figure stopped. Then, for the first time, it spoke. Not in his voice. Not in his mother's, but in a voice he hadn't heard in years. A voice that didn't belong here. You left us. Ethan's stomach twisted. The walls around him seemed to breathe, the air thick with something unseen. The house wasn't just a place. It was alive. It had always been alive. And it had been waiting for him to come back. The thing in the doorway and the figure in the hallway stood motionless, silent now, watching, waiting. The whispering returned, seeping from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Ethan's vision blurred. His thoughts spun in frantic circles. He needed to run. But there was nowhere left to go. Ethan's breath came in short, ragged gasps. His body was locked in place. His muscles coiled so tight they ached. The house was no longer just watching him. It was closing in, wrapping around him like a living thing, pressing against his skin with an unseen force. The figure in the hallway didn't move, but Ethan felt its presence pressing against his mind, sinking into places he had long forgotten. Its voice echoed through his skull, twisting through old memories like vines reclaiming abandoned ground. You left us. The words repeated, not just in the air, but inside him, crawling through his thoughts, dragging pieces of his past to the surface. And then something cracked. Not in the house. Inside him. A flood of images rushed forward, too fast to grasp, too overwhelming to make sense of. A darkened room. A voice calling his name. A door he had been told never to open. And a shadow waiting behind it. The air around him rippled, the whispering voices growing louder, more urgent. He clenched his fists, trying to push the memories back, but the house wouldn't let him. It was unraveling the truth, pulling him deeper into something he had spent his entire life running from. Then, in the middle of the chaos, the thing in the doorway laughed. Low and quiet at first, but rising, stretching, twisting into something inhuman. Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned, his eyes locking onto the figure still wearing his face. It was no longer standing in the doorway. It was inside the kitchen now, closer than before, its movements smooth and effortless, like it had always belonged here. You're starting to see, it whispered, tilting its head. Ethan shook his head, stumbling backward until his back hit the counter. His heart pounded as the kitchen lights flickered, casting distorted shadows across the walls. No, he whispered. This isn't real. The figure smiled. Then why do you remember? A wave of nausea rolled over him. The memories kept pushing forward, breaking through whatever wall had been keeping them buried. Locked room. His mother's voice warning him. The night he finally opened the door. And the thing that stepped out of the dark. The figure in the hallway moved. Not walking, gliding. One long, slow step into the kitchen. The air crackled like static, the pressure around Ethan's chest tightening. Something wasn't right. His mother had spent years keeping him away from this house, but she never told him why. She never told him what had been waiting here, just beyond the edges of his childhood memories. But now the house was showing him. A sound shuddered through the walls. Slow, deep heartbeat. Not his. The house was alive. And it had been waiting for him to come back. The figure in the hallway took another step. Ethan's body screamed at him to move, to run, to escape while he still could. But something held him there, something beyond fear, beyond logic. Question. Memory. Something he had forgotten. The figure in the hallway, he knew it. Not just from his nightmares. From his past. A sharp ringing filled his ears. The walls seemed to pulse, the whispering voices rising to a deafening chorus. The figure in the hallway finally stepped into the light. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was him. Not a copy. Not a reflection. The real him. Older. Hollowed out. Eyes dark and empty, face thin, body stretched in ways that no human should be. And then it spoke. You never left. Ethan's world shattered. Everything, the memories, the voices, the house itself, collapsed in on him. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a nightmare. He had never escaped. The life he thought he had lived, the years spent away from this house. It was all a lie. The truth had been waiting for him here all along. And now there was no running from it. Ethan's world tilted. The walls around him pulsed, the house breathing in a rhythm that didn't match his own. His legs felt unsteady, like he was standing on shifting ground. The truth was right in front of him, staring at him with hollow eyes, wearing his face, speaking in his voice. He never left. His entire life outside of this house. Was it real? His childhood memories, his mother pulling him away, the warnings, the fear. All of it had led back here. But the past he thought he knew was unraveling. He had spent years believing he had escaped, that the house was just a bad memory, but the figure in front of him, the real him, was proof that wasn't true. A deep pressure filled his chest, like something heavy had settled inside him. His mind raced, searching for a way to make sense of it all. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That's not possible." The other Ethan, the one who had been waiting, simply watched. He didn't move, didn't blink. The whispering in the house had faded, replaced by something worse, silence. A silence so thick it felt alive. Then the other Ethan smiled. "You don't understand yet," he said. His voice was calm, patient. "But you will." Ethan took a shaky step back, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What do you mean?" The house shuddered. The lights flickered wildly, casting shadows that stretched unnaturally across the walls. The air thickened, pressing against his skin. "You never left," the other Ethan repeated. "Because you never got out." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The memories crashed into him all at once. The locked door, the whispering voices, the thing that reached for him when he was a child. He remembered now. The night he had disobeyed his mother's warnings. The night he had opened the door at the end of the hall. And the night the house took him. It hadn't just haunted him. It hadn't just watched him. It had consumed him. The world spun, his vision blurring as the realization sank deep into his bones. His entire life outside these walls. Was it a dream? A trick? Or just a desperate illusion his mind had created to escape the truth? "No," Ethan whispered. His head pounded, his hands shaking. "That can't be right. I lived a life. You existed," the other Ethan corrected. "But not out there. You've been here. Always." The silence pressed in tighter. The house was listening, watching. Ethan looked down at his hands. They felt real. His body felt real. But so did the other Ethan. And that's when he saw it. A shift in the air, a ripple in the space between them. Two versions of the same thing cannot exist in one place. Something had to be a lie. And the house wasn't going to let both of them stay. The air cracked with unseen energy, the floorboards groaning beneath his feet. The house was choosing. Ethan's vision blurred. His mind raced. If he had never truly left, then was this his chance? A single thought surfaced. If the house had kept him, maybe it could let him go. But one of them had to stay behind. His gaze snapped back to the other Ethan. The one who had been waiting. "You knew this would happen," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. The other Ethan's smile didn't falter. "It was always going to end this way." A deep rumble shook the house. The walls trembled, the lights surged with a blinding flash, and everything collapsed. Darkness swallowed the room. A heavy force wrapped around Ethan, pulling, dragging, tearing at him. His thoughts scattered, his body weightless and sinking all at once. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. Silence. The air was still. The house was gone. Ethan gasped, his lungs burning as he sucked in deep, shaky breaths. The floor beneath him was solid. The air smelled different, clean, fresh, real. He opened his eyes. Morning light streamed through the windows. The house was quiet. He was standing at the front door. And it was open. His heart pounded as he stumbled forward, his legs weak, his head spinning. He stepped outside, the cold morning air hitting his skin like a shock. The street was empty. The world felt real. He turned back to look at the house. stood silent, unmoving. But something felt off. His gaze drifted to the window on the second floor. And that's when he saw it. Figure. Standing just behind the glass. Watching him. Smiling. It was still him. But now he was the one outside. And the other Ethan was still inside. The door swung shut on its own. Click. Ethan took a step back, his breath hitching. The house had made its choice. Now, he was free. Ethan stood frozen on the sidewalk, his breath shallow, his pulse still thudding in his ears. The house loomed behind him, silent now, still and unassuming, as if nothing had happened. But he knew better. The truth clung to him like a second skin, impossible to shake. The other Ethan was still inside. The weight of that realization settled deep in his bones. Had he truly escaped? Or had the house simply shifted its grip, replacing one prisoner with another? His stomach twisted at the thought. He turned his gaze back to the street. Everything looked normal. The sky was pale blue, the wind rustled the trees, the world kept moving as if nothing had changed. But he had changed. Ethan took a step forward, half expecting the house to pull him back, to drag him inside once more. But nothing happened. The ground stayed solid beneath him, the air cool against his skin. He was really here. He forced himself to walk. One step, then another. His legs felt unsteady, but they carried him forward, away from the house, away from the nightmare that had nearly swallowed him whole. As he reached the corner, he hesitated. Part of him wanted to run, to never look back. But some deeper instinct made him glance over his shoulder one last time. The house looked the same as always. Peeling paint, sagging porch, a place long forgotten by the world. But in the upstairs window he was still watching. The other Ethan. The reflection of the life he had nearly been trapped in forever. Ethan's breath hitched, but he didn't move. The figure behind the glass didn't either. Just stood there smiling. Not in malice. Not in anger. Just watching. A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. Then, as if sensing it was time, the figure lifted a hand. Slow, deliberate wave. Ethan swallowed hard. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. He didn't stop. Not when he reached his car. Not when he drove past the city limits. Not even when he reached his apartment miles away, where the world felt real again. But no matter how far he went, something lingered. The feeling of eyes on his back. The quiet hum of something unseen just beyond the edges of his reality. The memory of himself still waiting in that house. Ethan tried to move on. He told himself he was free. That whatever the house had done to him was over. Weeks passed. The world carried on. But sometimes, late at night, when the room was dark and silent, he swore he could see movement in his reflection. Just a flicker. A shift in the corner of his eye. Like something was watching. Waiting. And sometimes just before he turned away he thought he saw it. That same smile. Quiet, knowing wave. And the truth settled deep inside him. You never really leave.